How you doing, coaches? So this video is going to be more for, kind of volunteers or individuals without a whole lot of experience in running, switching formations, who maybe you run a recreational team, maybe you just volunteer somewhere, or maybe you have a little bit of experience running more of a core-based approach, but you're really looking now to shift more to a competitive style, whether it's to prepare your players for their middle school tryouts, or maybe you have some really, really skilled players who want to try out for club and you just want to give them the best opportunity possible. So what we're going to talk today is a 6-2 switch with a basically a front right setter. There's different ways of doing it, but I find that for a recreational or a team that doesn't have a whole lot of practice time, that this is not only the most feasible thing to do, but it's also what you're more likely to see at your middle schools, where setters aren't necessarily passing backwards yet, like your seventh and your eighth grade tryouts. Once you get to high school, by that point they're running much more complicated schemes. But overall, this is a great transition because it's easy to teach, it's quick, it's fast, and it's something that can be done to really spice up the amount of fun your players can have, as opposed to having them in a rectangular box where they just kind of fall over each other trying to figure out who's supposed to get it. So I'm going to quickly talk about what the positions are, what base position means, and essentially how this is designed to work before we go into how to do shifts. So essentially, the way this is designed is that everyone has a set responsibility. So you'll look here and you'll see that you have two outside hitters on the left, you have middle blockers in the middle, and you have a setter and a defensive specialist on the right. Now, if you see other diagrams where this is a right side hitter and a setter, it's because they run a back row setter, but what I'm going to show you doesn't do that. So it's the same positions as far as location. It's just what they're designed to do on the court. All right, now base position is where you go after switch. What that means is after contact is made and you move to the ball, it allows you to be in the spot you want to be, and you just call it base position. Now, the goal of this front right setter is that essentially you have your setter in the front right, and you are pulling your middle blocker and your outside hitter back to make the pass for the attack. Where your outside hitter, realistically, you're going to have your outside hitter more over here, even maybe off the court, depending on how advanced you are, and they're essentially coming at an angle for the ball. And then your middle blocker is more for a quick set, for them to come up and quickly attack the defense. So based on age, you'll find that the younger teams, you tend to get more passes to the middle blocker because it's closer and that's where they're more comfortable. But as teams get more experienced and your setter gets better, you're going to find that this outside hitter is your primary target because those long passes allow a better angle to hit cross court. And you're going to find in middle school, like, your team thrives off of this hitter. Your OH1 and your OH2, your two outside hitters, generally make or break the team with your setter. So really important positions, but overall everybody has a really strong role. So that's really what base attack is when we're talking about your base position and your goal of your attack. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how you would run this. Now, I'm going to show you how to run it for a younger team, which would be, your fourth, your fifth grade, maybe sixth grade if they're new and they're not quite good at passing to location yet. And then your really advanced teams, which would be fifth up, that might be ready to pass to location with an actual defensive switch. But for the younger teams that aren't ready for that, I'm going to show you how you can run this without necessarily using a defensive shift. All right, here we go. So essentially you have 6 positions on the court. Know that your middle blockers are just like that. They're designed to be in the middle. At younger ages, you just want them to play a little bit of everything, but at the older ages, your middle blockers are going to be your taller, your longer players, and they're generally going to be the ones that are more for blocking. They're also attackers, but they're generally going to be the ones who come up quick and just really put a hammer down fast. Your outside hitters, they are your primary attackers. They are the ones who generally are going to be quicker, they're faster, and they can put a better hit on the ball. So they're going to be hitting cross court. And generally they are right-handed because the left side of the court is where your right-handed hitters hit from. All right, and then you have your setter and your defensive specialist. They're linked in the fact that when you rotate and the setter goes down and the defensive specialist comes up, they switch positions. So that's where you can either sub and someone move as they come up or back. But essentially, they take each other's place when they rotate around, and your setter is going to be the one in the front right that is setting the attacks, and your defensive specialist is more just a back row player that is really good at setting or passing if need be. They're going to be able to get that ball up here to this right corner. But those are your positions. All right, now what I also want you to notice is that each position is 3 rotations away from its opposite. So the color code shows what I mean by its opposite. So if you notice this setter, it would take 3 rotations to get to where the defensive specialist is. It would take 3 rotations for this middle blocker to get to the other middle blocker. And it would take 3 rotations for this outside hitter to get to the other outside hitter. That is intentional because every time you rotate, you got to make sure you have a setter, a middle blocker, and an outside hitter in the front, and an outside hitter, a middle blocker, and a defensive specialist in the back. That's the only way that my rotations will work. So you'll notice when we rotate and this outside hitter comes down, this outside hitter comes up, and we have what we need. When we rotate again and the middle blockers come down, this middle blocker comes up, and we have the same. And then when we rotate again, we end up right back to this initial start point where you have, the only difference is your back players are in the front and your front row players are in the back. So you'll notice I'm using a 6-2, which means essentially 2 setters on the floor, which would be these two, because it only requires 3 shifts you got to learn, because you do the same shifts in the front as you do in the back. Now, the pro of this is that it's easier to learn, and for a team that you don't have a lot of practice time with, especially if you have new players kind of coming each season, this is easier to learn. The con to it is you're going to have 2 people kind of playing each position as you go around. So if you have like one amazing outside hitter, you really can't take that outside hitter and just keep her up there the whole time in a 6-2, because when she rotates to the back, the switches put her in the back left. So like I said, this really is more for teams where practice time is kind of limited, and you're kind of looking for a quick, easy way just to get them in the field to prep for middle school or club, or just to get a more competitive team based on the resources you have. But if you're really looking to always have the same player in each position all the way around, you're really going to look at more of a 5-1. And a 5-1 just means that you're going to have to learn 6 switches, though, because every time you rotate to a new spot, you're trying to get that player to the exact same location, even in the back. All right, so now that you understand why we have it set up the way we do, and how when you rotate you have the same in the front and the back, let's talk about how the shifts work. So on serve, you want to move right on contact, regardless if it's a younger and older team. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do receive, but for serve, you're always going to move on contact. So what you'll notice is in this situation, the only 2 players that are not in base are the setter and the outside hitter. So you're simply going to bring them together in the middle, where the middle blocker is, and then you're going to take your outside hitter and go ahead and roll her up to the 13-foot line. So this is the 13-foot line. This is your 10-foot line. Now, it looks like these players are at the 10-foot line, but not. It's just the circles are a certain size, right? They have to fit on the screen. But really, they're all close to the net, and they're all moving at the net. So no, on offense, you always want to be at the net. I just can't really display that in this size of a picture. Now, I would also recommend taking your middle blocker, and based on age, you don't really want to play her that far back, because the younger the girls, the more the balls are going to be close to the front, and the less they're actually going to be spiking because they're learning the skill. You're going to see a lot more tips, and you're going to see a lot more floor attacks where they just hit it nice and high and around this 20-foot line. So kind of based on your league and the teams you're playing, make the adjustment, but know that you don't want your middle blocker at the earlier ages way back here, because even if they're 8 or 10 feet off the line, they can always set anything above their head if it's going to go over the top of them. You don't want to play too far back. But whenever the defensive specialist comes off the serve, your outside hitter comes up, these come to the middle, and then right off of contact, boom, they switch, they go to their spots, and then the defensive specialist comes to her corner, and you are right in your base position. And that would be your first switch. All right, now on defense, depending at your age range, if you have a group of girls that aren't ready to pass the location off the serve, which means off the serve, they're going to make too many errors trying to pass to where this setter is. Well, then I would just keep them in a box. Let them stay in a box, and then as soon as you return the ball, have them switch to their spots. Now, this is the one switch where you may just want to have the setter come up and play the outside hitter, and you may want to have the outside hitter come up and just play the setter, because this is a long ways to run after you return the ball. And you're going to get caught in transition 1 or 2 times every game when they do a quick return and your players are trying to run to their spot. So if you're at a point where you're not able to pass the location, then you're most likely at a spot where every player needs to practice everything anyway. So it doesn't hurt to let these outside hitters get to play a little bit of setter, so that way they can learn how to do it. But if you just really want this setter there, well, then just switch on location after a return. But just know that you will get caught in transition occasionally, especially when they notice that, and experienced teams may just quickly tip it over before these players can get to where they want to be. So just keep that in mind. And by tip, I don't mean jump up and block, that's illegal. But I mean, you may just see a real quick return where it just comes right in this 10-foot area where they're switching. All right, but if you have a more advanced team, you have a team that's old enough where they can pass to location, there's a couple options of how you can do it. The goal is you want to move to a 3-player back. And I know this doesn't sound tactical, because if you're accustomed to this, you're like, well, my players aren't aggressive enough. Well, your players aren't aggressive because they have somebody standing 10 feet in front of them, and they're waiting to see what they're going to do. But what you want to do is rely on that back players at around the 20-foot line to know that they're going to be more aggressive, knowing that they have to get the ball. So in this situation, you can either leave it just like this in the front row with your 3 back. And I'm not showing you how to run a libero. If you run a libero, you can have a libero for your middle blocker or your outside hitter. Generally, your defensive specialist is going to be pretty good as it is. That's why it's called a defensive specialist. But if you just want to have your libero in, you can leave this middle blocker here and just do this exact same thing in the front, and then have them switch on contact. I generally don't do that just because that's a lot of bodies in the front to block the ball if the server kind of hides behind them. But for younger ages, it may not be as big of a deal because the ball may be higher. Now, if you want to run a libero, what you can do is you can just leave it like this, run your libero for the back middle blocker, and then you could potentially either just tuck this middle blocker away to the side so that it's not blocking the view, or you can just have her go ahead and come to the net and then the same thing. As soon as they hit the ball, switch. And then you have everybody there and your setter where they want to be. What I do is I just pull my middle blocker back because my middle blockers are still pretty good defensively. I'm not worried about using libero. I run my libero on the outside hitter based on how I run my defense. So that's generally where she is. Middle blockers, they have to play defense anyway from me. But pull her back, just kick this one off to the side. You have your 3-player set. You bring your setter and your outside hitter to the middle. As soon as they touch the ball, my setter runs to her spot. My outside hitter comes to her corner. And then as soon as we return it, my middle blocker can slide up for the attack. And hopefully we get a good pass to my setter. And then from there, you just go to your base. Now, like I said, if you have a younger team and they're not ready to pass to location, well, then this isn't beneficial. This is designed to get a jump spike off of the pass, off the serve. It's not really designed to just hit the ball over, even though sometimes you'll do that when they're running full speed. It just depends on how good your team is. But this is an example, or you can just keep your middle blocker up, use a libero, and then have this middle blocker replaced. So that would be the first shift. All right, the second shift, everybody's rotated, and now your outside hitter is your server. Once the server comes off, there is no longer a restriction on that player. So your defensive specialist can just go right to her base place. She can just go right to her corner. This middle blocker can go ahead and slide to her spot because she's right, doesn't have a restriction. She's to the left of the defensive specialist. Your outside hitter can go ahead and go to the net because you always start at the net when you serve. And then these 2 players just come together at the net. And then as soon as you serve, everybody moves to their spot. Now here's my recommendation. Know that your server can be anywhere behind the net, but you want to make sure she has a straight path to where she is. So make sure that middle blocker adjusts wherever so that as soon as this player makes contact, she can go straight to where she wants to be. You don't want her making a big loop to get around the middle blocker if she's here, or you don't want them to be constantly like going around each other where there's a distraction. So just wherever this player is, have the middle blocker adjust to just make sure she has a straight line path. But she's only taken 2 steps to where she wants to be as fast. All right, and that would be your switch. You're right back in your base. On defense, once again, new team, not ready to pass the location yet on the serve. You leave them in a box, and then as soon as you return the ball, just switch to your spots. Nobody's going too far on this one, so you generally won't get caught in transition, unless your players just don't know where to go yet, and they just don't go there, which will happen a lot the first season you run this. All right, next thing you want to do if you are running a defensive switch is this is fairly simple. Just you already have your back row. Now just push this outside hitter and this middle blocker to the sides. On this one, you now have someone to kind of help at that 10-foot range. So like if a ball comes here, they can quickly come up. No issues there. And your setter is up here ready to go. Now here's the key though. If you have a more advanced team and you have a setter that is quick to the ball and you have an outside hitter that's good in the attack, you can actually take your setter and tuck her just to the left of the middle blocker and behind. And then as soon as contact, she can come up to her spot and she's still out of the way. It is easier for setters generally to kind of jump and set forward, so they're facing the outside hitter when they pass, as opposed to having to learn to twist and turn. So it really depends on how good your setter is, and how good you pass. But another option is taking your setter and tucking it back there behind the middle blocker. Just make sure you follow the rules of, placement, being in front and to the side of the player they need to. I'm not making a video on that. That's something you have to find somewhere else. All right, and that would be your second shift. Now when you rotate again, now your middle blocker is serving, your setter comes up to her spot, and then both of these players just come together, and then off of contact, everybody switches. The arrows show how it works. Right back in base. On defense with a younger team, just leave them in a box. As soon as you return, everybody goes to their spot. On defense, if you're going to run an actual defensive shift, you already have all 3 players here. Just take this setter, tuck her to the side. She's your 10-foot kind of cushion. Your middle blocker is your 10-foot cushion here. And then take this front outside hitter, tuck her about an inch to the right of the middle blocker because you got to be to the right. She's in front of the outside hitter, so she's fine. And then as soon as they touch the ball, she can literally step off the court and she's ready for her attack. The middle blocker can slide to the middle, and your setter can go to her spot. And those are the only 3 shifts. And then when they rotate again, you will notice that you are right back to your start point 1. The difference is your back row players are in the front, and your front row players are in the back. Now, at this point, if you're running the same player for your setter and defensive specialist, you're fine. She just has a new role. But if not, you can just sub in a new setter and a new defensive specialist to play the back row. So basically the setter only plays the front, and you have basically 2 setters you rotate in, and your defensive specialist only plays the back. So you have 2 players you're rotating throughout the game. And those are just options you have. All right, so the pros of a 6-2 is that it's much more simplistic when you're running a right side setter. But the con is you only have 2 attackers. You don't have that player in back. But like I said, this is intended for teams that are more recreational or they're just learning it. Because setters are not really good at passing backwards, so it's kind of a waste. You don't have to be sneaky. Just be good at what you do, and you're going to win a lot of games if you use this right. But it's kind of a waste to be trying to teach your team to pass backwards and to have your setter running up, especially when you don't have the practice time to get the girls that in sync with each other to be chasing the ball. All right, I hope this video helps. It's a great way for newer coaches or even parents who are volunteering to try to help players out that are a little more advanced and ready to do something bigger. But just know at your middle school tryouts, this is what they're going to be seeing. So you want to try to give them something a little bit closer. And here's my Hail Mary option for any parents who or coaches who want to run this idea but don't want to do the actual switches. Just do a standard box rotation and just have them play the position when they get there. So basically this player at the outside hitter will play middle blocker on a switch, and then they'll play setter, and so on and so on. And this would be the last way to run this and start to teach them how to do setters and set attacks without necessarily learning the switches. And that could be a start point before you go to this. All right, have a great season. I hope this helps.